Run for Your Life, usually seen at this time, will not be presented tonight, so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
His paintings redefined comic book heroes. His vision inspired a generation. The Legend of Kingdom Come is the definitive documentary on Alex Ross, known as the Norman Rockwell of comics.
It almost looked like Renaissance paintings, except for superheroes.
He makes them look like Olympian gods.
We go behind the scenes of his definitive graphic novel, Kingdom Come, now on Blu-ray, packed with exclusive interviews and unseen artwork. Order today at legendofkingdomcome.com.
If you're here at Word Balloon, it's because you like comics, creators, conversation, pop culture subjects. Would you consider joining the League of Word Balloon Listeners? Patreon.com/wordballoon. For just $3 a month or more, you'll get exclusive access to the Word Balloon e-magazine, featuring transcriptions of some of my best conversations. When you subscribe, you'll also be part of the Word Balloon Book Club, where Brian Michael Bendis and I will pick a comic every month to review and discuss live with the League on this show. Join the League today, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you always for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners.
Brad Meltzer, welcome back to Word Balloon. Great to see you, buddy.
Good to be here.
You got a lot on the list, buddy. I mean, you're on book tour. You're in Superman's hometown, but I know too you're on your Viper tour. Tell us about the Viper.
Yeah, the Viper begins with a really simple premise. A man walks into a funeral home. He's carrying his favorite blue suit. He's got a terminal disease, and this is the suit that he wants to be buried in. But here's the thing, John. If you go to your local bank and you open up a safety deposit box, well, paperwork gets filed. It means the government can eventually track it. Same thing if you go to the UPS store and you open up a P.O. box. But if you secretly sew something into the lining of your suit and you hand that suit over to your local mortician, you have an ultimate untraceable hiding spot. So man leaves that suit with the mortician, goes back to his hotel room. There's a guy with a gun waiting who says, "Where is it?" Man says, "I don't know what you're talking about." The guy shoots him dead, and you won't believe what's hidden in that suit or who's about to find it. And that's chapter 1 of The Viper. I just love that I'm talking about it, though, in Cleveland, in the home of Superman. But this is the last stop on the Viper book tour, and it has been running for the past 2 weeks now.
Your protagonist, Nola Brown. How many Nola Brown books is it now?
So this is the third book in the series for Zig and Nola. You don't have to read any of the others. You can start with them fresh. My wife was like proofing this book, and she's like, "I don't remember what happened. That was like 4 years ago." And I'm like, "I'm married to you and had children with you." But of course, I always write it so that I don't expect people to remember. You know, Stan Lee taught me that every comic is someone's first. So I treat my books, it's going to be someone's first. You don't have to read anything. And I love Nola. She's my badass character. And I love Zig. You know, Zig believes if you're a good person, you put good into the world, you make the world a better place. And that's a beautiful idea, a completely naive idea, but it's an idea worth fighting for. And Nola's the opposite. She's like, that's garbage. Like, if you want the world to make sense, grab it by the throat and you force it to make sense. Especially when you see someone being picked on, you got to fight. And that's also an idea worth fighting for. And truthfully, John, I think I spent a long time trying to figure out, like, am I Zig? Am I Nola? Like, which one should I be? And I finally realized you don't have to choose. You can accept all the parts of who you are and love yourself for who you are.
Not the first author to tell me they see themselves in all their characters. That's great. For people who only know you, and certainly my audience might know you primarily from comics and your I Am wonderful children's history books. But my sister, as you know, longtime fan of your novels and is very psyched to read the new one. Tell me about the pacing of action in a novel compared to a comic.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. When I took over Green Arrow, I got hired to do Green Arrow after the great Kevin Smith was leaving the book. And I'd written 4 novels at that point. I had to write 4 novels to break into comics. And I never, you know, again, you just do what you do. You know, I remember when my 3rd novel came out, someone read it and said, "I've read 3 of your books now, Brad. What are your issues with your father?" And none of the books were about a father character, none of them. But it was clear that I was putting stuff in there that I didn't even realize I was putting in there. And when the fourth book came out and they hired me for Green Arrow, some comic reader out there said, this is back in old message board days, and wrote, I've read 4 of Brad Meltzer's books and I realized they're just like comic books. There's like 22 pages and then there's a cliffhanger. There's a short chapter and a cliffhanger. And I read that comment and I was like, oh crap, I didn't even realize that like comics they're like my Mr. Miyagi, right? They train me that you do it quickly and then you leave a cliffhanger. And so pacing for me all comes from comics. It was built out of that.
Interesting. And again, I think it comes through in your novels in a great way. Um, I'm excited, man. So yeah, people can pick up the Audible, or they could pick up the novel. It's been out since the beginning of the year, and I'm glad you're wrapping up. But as we said, you're in the hometown of Superman, and then you're coming back. You were there a couple of years ago, weren't you, for the big celebration?
You know what? Guess where I went today? I was so happy to go there because they put me on book tour and they always, you got to go and you do the press and you do the things. But I'm in Cleveland, baby. So you know where I went. I went to see
Boom.
it. I was
Boom.
like, we built that statue, the Siegel and Schuster Society. I worked hard working with everyone that made that possible. And this morning I had this NPR radio interview, and I basically was like, wait, we're in downtown Cleveland. Where's the convention center? I want to go there. I was here last, we worked to save the house where Superman was created. The statue if you go in the baggage claim in Cleveland, Ohio, when you come down in baggage claim, there's a full color statue of Superman. Look closely, my name's on there. So I helped fund that thing, but a lot of great people at the Siegel and Schuster Society, we all worked together to make that thing happen. And just so happy. When I first went to Jerry Siegel's house over a decade ago, the woman who lived there said, the city of Cleveland won't even give us a plaque to say that Superman was created here. Not even a plaque. And I said to her, I'm going to get you your plaque. And I didn't know really what I meant. It was just a macho thing to say at the time. But I said, I'm going to get you your plaque. And I got her plaque. I love the fact that we've been able to save that house where Jerry Siegel dreamed up Superman, renovate that house. I co-wrote the sign that's out front on the big S. And I love the fact that we help fund the Superman statues that are here as well. That's vital to me.
I hope to get there sometime. Buddies like Bendis and Philip Kennedy Johnson have told me how great the Siegel House is. And I know, Brad, I mean, we talked about it when you were raising the money. Way to go. Well, here we are, 60th anniversary of the first Spider-Man Superman crossover. And look who's writing the crossover for Marvel.
Trust me. I mean, I've been so busy doing my work on Ghost Machine, which I love and adore, with Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch and all so many incredible people, Gary Frank. Now I'm going to start naming people. And of course, there's everyone from Rob to Brad. Everyone that works there, Jason Paybach, and is amazing. I love working with them all. And Marvel called me, and it was right when the Fantastic Four movie was coming out last summer. And I get this call from Nick Lowe at Marvel, and he's like, hey, I got this project. I'm like, Nick, I love you. I got a book coming out in January. I'm working on Ghost Machine stuff and our comic book First Ghost that's going to be coming out at the end of the summer. There's just nothing I don't have the physical time. We got kids' books going. And he says, you want to do Spider-Man, Superman? And there's, that's the end of the call. That's it. There's no way I was going to say no to that. I've been waiting 50 years to write that book.
Do you remember buying the original that Conway and Ross Andrew and Esposito did 60 years ago?
Not only so, of course, the first thing I did is I pulled out my copy, and it's funny. I had it, the Parasite cover, the original cover. It was great, and found it. It was in my head. It was perfectly preserved. Like all my oversized books, Superman Muhammad Ali is perfectly preserved. Remember the one who was it's like all the Justice League members is like an eagle and a shield, and then the members are kind of like running toward you out of it. Like all my digests, they're preserved. This Spider-Man Superman comic that I had, the earliest one, I pulled it off the shelf. It looks like it went through the shredder. Like I don't think I have a worse edition of anything that I own. That I looked at it now and I was like, oh no, we're gonna have to I gotta find a better one than this. And what's so funny is during COVID, people are always, when you like comics and someone has a comic book collection, anyone knows that, like, if someone dies and they're like, I have some comics to sell, can you give me some advice? Like, we all get those calls. I'm sure you get those calls. And inevitably everyone's collection is garbage. Like, it means they basically bought like 20 copies of The Death of Superman and some poly bags of X-Men, and that's what they got. And I'm just like, you're not making millions on this thing. And but I was trying to be nice. It was an older woman, and she was a friend of my cousin, and she said her husband passed away, and could I take a look at the collection? So I said, fine. And I go on FaceTime, and she's flipping through, and she's got Avengers #1 original,
Oh my God.
Unfreezing of Captain America. She's got full runs. And I'm like, oh, no, you have great stuff. Like, and she's like, yeah, local comic store trying to give me X amount. I'm like, do not sell to them. Like, let me make sure you get top dollar. So I want to help her. So I actually go to her house because she's my cousin's friend. And I go through all her comics. I find, some of the, Mark, who runs Baltimore Comic Con, I put her in touch with him. I was like, make sure she gets top dollar. And he helps me pull out, because I don't even know what the best stuff is. I know the obvious stuff of Avengers, but he's like, make sure to find the first appearance of Black Panther and this and that, like all the stuff that's in there. And he makes sure she gets top dollar. I make sure we get, I actually bought like one or, a couple books from her and made sure he priced them for us so she would get even more. And as I'm leaving her house, the thing that wasn't in the long boxes was the Superman, Spider-Man, the second one, right? The one that came out when Batman Hulk came out, the famous one everyone knows, where Superman's flying in the air and Spider-Man's kind of swinging at him. And I couldn't find that in my collection. I just didn't know where it was. It just escaped me somewhere. I must have lost it in a move or something, or misplaced it. And she sees it. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh man, I love that book. That book was always like, had a place in my heart. I don't know where mine is. And she's like, no, you were so nice to me. You did all this stuff for free. Let me give you this book. And that's the book she gives me in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, in this old woman's house. And so to be able to, now that they're like, you're going to write the 50th anniversary celebration of it, I jumped at it.
That's great, man. Now, I'm going to ask you particulars, and obviously, I don't want you to spoil. Are you able to tell me how many pages your story is?
So it was supposed to be 20. First, they said 22. Then I begged for 25. And then I handed 27 in. And I said to them, they basically said, it's too many, we got to cut. And I said, this is the deal I made. I was so committed to the story being told in the way that I really hoped it could be told, is I literally had them pay me for only 25 pages. I said, because I didn't want them to think that I was doing it to like charge them more. I'm like, I'm so committed that this is how you have to tell the story. I said, just pay me for 25. I said, you can have the rest of it for free. That's how committed I am to making sure the story is everything, because it's Superman and Spider-Man, and I don't want to do it short shrift, and I don't want it to just be like a cheap, nostalgia porn issue. Like, there's something to be said about these characters. These characters represent not just those companies, but all of us as readers. And I wanted to make sure it had the space to breathe and be an actual true story.
I know your longtime history with Superman, and also you've written the Justice League, and you and Jeff, of course, the Lightning Strikes story, and the continuation of that story as well. Spider-Man, though, is this your first long form Spider-Man story?
I did my only Marvel work is they asked me to do a Marvel 1000 one-page story, and Tom Brevoort was very, very smart, because he said to me, "Can you do this?" And I said, "I don't have time." He knows I always wanted to write Spider-Man, and it's always been one of those heroes that I've always wanted to get my hands on. And he said, "Brad, it's one page. That's all I want is one page." And I was like, I was like, oh, I got to do that, because I thought I'll never be able to do it again. They ask you to write Spider-Man, you jump. And the truth was, it's actually harder to write a one-page story than you think, because you have to tell a whole story in just those X amount of panels. That was my first Marvel work I ever did, and I see it always going around the internet, that story, which I love doing. But this is my first ever full-time Marvel story that I've ever done.
These are two really different heroes. I mean, not just their ages, but where they're coming from, the backgrounds, everything. Um, so yeah, I mean, how is it coordinating a team up between these two very different heroes?
Yeah, I think for me, what I always looked at is, what's the core of the character? What do you want to say here? And oddly, in my novels, I don't figure that out until the end, because in a 400-page novel, I need to kind of spend those 2 years with the characters, and then I can kind of see the theme when I'm done and be like, I know what the plot is, I know what I want the theme to be, but inevitably there's other stuff that I'm putting in that's going in with my life, whether it was my mom passing away or my dad passing away. Like, I'm like, oh, this is all about loss, or oh, this is all about whatever it might be in years past. But comics are different for me. Comics are the one place where I think, because they're contained, and especially in this case, because it's one issue, I really did not want to start until it said something about these characters and who they are. And like you said, what they stand for. I mean, these characters are not just characters, they're symbols. And they're proof of who we want to be. There are aspirations, right? There are fight and our kindness and our everything that we want to be as people. Our potential is, to me, how I describe Superman and Spider-Man. And so it took me a bit, and it took a while to do the negotiations. And I know DC and Marvel were still negotiating. They were trying to figure out me and trying to get me hired. And eventually I knew what the story was in my head. I cracked it in my head, and my deal was not even close to being done. And I just said, I don't care, I'm writing it. And I wrote the whole thing in one sitting. Boom, it just poured out of me. And I said, if I don't make this deal and it falls apart, because it took months to figure it all out, I said, I don't even care, because the only way I'm going to stop thinking about this book is if I write it. And so I wrote the whole thing. I said, if they don't make the deal, I'm just going to release it as fan fiction. I really meant it. I was like, I'm going to just release it as fan fiction, be like, look what I did, and maybe ask some friends to draw it and see what we get. But luckily, the contracts came together, and we get to actually see it.
That's excellent. All right, that promotes a wild hair question. Um, we're only a few years away from Superman being in the public domain, and I've talked to a lot of creators about that. And again, Brad, your long association with him, would you write a public domain Action One kind of story about Superman?
I'm fascinated by it, right? I mean, we saw everyone said they were going to do Mickey Mouse when Steamboat Willie came into the public domain. The only place I've seen it is some law firm has a Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, because obviously you don't get all Superman. You don't get John Byrne. You don't get like
Right.
all the other versions. You get that first version. You get that Shield. You get the original OG. It's going to be fascinating, because I actually wonder, like, what powers do you get when that one comes? Can he just jump because the radio show was a little later and the radio show is what gave him flight? Like, it's going to be fascinating. But I haven't even thought about it, but I think it's going to be a crazy time. We're going to get a lot more Superman content than I think people realize.
I think you're right. Absolutely. And also, by the way, regarding your story, you're going back to not only the two of them, but the original two villains in the first crossover, right? Doc Ock and Lex.
Uh, I'll say that some things have been reported correctly, some things have not been reported as correctly, but I'm not going to deny that those characters make an appearance. And Lex Luthor was the easy one, right? You're going to do Lex Luthor. You got to do Lex Luthor. And then the question is, okay, so who do you do? Do you do Doc Ock? Do you do Green Goblin? Who's the best Spider-Man villain? Or who's the best one that pairs with Lex? When you put that in, that becomes a different question. I mean, and this was, to me, what I love. I love going to the comic store as a kid, not just to get my pull box, but because it was the one spot. It was pre-internet, but it was the one spot where you could talk to people about comics, and they actually had they were good about talking about comics. They knew their comics. Like, anyone can argue like who's going to win, Superman or the Hulk, and everyone's brother or sister, who little or older or whatever, can argue. But I love those comic store debates, right? They were like the real nerds getting in on whether it was Friday and when they moved it to Wednesday, or when they moved it to Thursday, whatever the comic date was in our lives. That was where you could have those debates. And in writing Superman, Spider-Man, you're living the debate, right? You're like, okay, who is Spider-Man's greatest villain that will pair up with a Lex Luthor? And what is the actual thing that you should do here? And, what is the difference in being a good person when it comes to Superman versus being a good person when it comes to Spider-Man? One built, obviously, on the love of his parents, and one that's really built on guilt, right? On loss, on tragedy. And I know it suddenly already starts sounding like very navel-gazy, right? But we love in comics to navel gaze. Like I love pulling apart these characters and figuring out what is the emotional underpinning and what ties them together. What do they have in common? What do they completely disagree on? And you're going to see.
Our friend Bendis always says we've seen a million punches against various people. What the real exciting thing now, especially with all of us that grew up with this stuff, is to get those conversations and really have some great sit down moments. I certainly hope that Clark and Peter are able to really sit down and really get to know each other and see the different.
Listen, I love Brian. He knows his books and he knows Superman as well as anyone knows Superman. And he's exactly right. Of course, that's what you have to do. And it's funny because Jeff Johns and I are both writing in that issue, and I've read Jeff's story. And we wrote our stories completely separately. And then they were trying to figure out his story and how he could do his, and they want to make sure things don't repeat. And before he read my story, I pitched him my story, and he already had his story, so he was pitching me his story, and our stories had the exact same ending. We literally wrote the same. It wasn't in what they say, but what they were doing. It was the same setup, and I was like, because that's the correct answer. This is what you should do if you get Superman and Spider-Man in one place. And we had very completely opposite setups, but just in terms of the final page, we both came at it. And again, I think a lot of people would come at it in the same way. I'm sure that my friend Mark Waid is going to, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to wager is, just as smart to do something similar. It's to me, the people who love these characters love them because they're so finely defined, right? That's what makes these characters great is when someone says, well, then Superman was being a jerk and then he did this, that like you're writing the character wrong, right? It's so well defined, what's wrong with the character. And to me, same with Batman, same with Spider-Man, there are right ways for them to act. And when you pull that apart, it leads you into certain spaces, I'll say.
What about the significant women in their lives? Are we going to see Lois and Mary Jane together?
Appearances are there. I mean, the thing is I remember when I wrote Justice League. Well, let me even start further back. I wrote Green Arrow. Okay. They asked me to write Green Arrow, but I have no idea if they're ever going to ask me to do it again. So I was like, screw it. On page one of when I write Green Arrow, my first comic book ever, guess who appears? Superman, right there. Because I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back to this party and I want to be here. And then when I wrote Justice League, and even when I wrote Identity Crisis, I was like, well, I got to put some Teen Titans in here because I don't know if they're going to ever have me back again. And then when they gave me Justice League, I was like, I got to put some Legion of Superhero in here because I don't know if they're ever going to have me again. And like, that shows you more how my brain works than anything else. But if they're going to give me a crack, I want you to see everybody. Of course, I want you to see who you should see. And I'll just say I worked very hard to make sure we get that right appearance in.
And we then
even small, even if it's a small one, it's an important one.
Fair enough. And then does that also mean we might see other Marvel heroes in the crossover as well?
For me, I didn't want to do to me, this was, if you have Superman and Spider-Man, I don't think you need everything else. I think to me, I was like, I have enough with what I have here. Villain, on the villain side, that's a different story. But on the hero side, every panel away from them felt like I was losing time with that main character. And I wanted that time to be, it wasn't that I wanted, it just was so valuable to me. I wanted that's why I said, they started 22 pages and I came out at 27. And I could have written it for 50. I could have filled the whole book easily. And you'll see, when you see the story, there's a part in the middle of it that you'll see where it picks up. And I could easily write another 50 pages on that. And you just have to pick where you're going to be in that exact moment to maximize all the character work you want to do, all the fighting you want to do, all the stuff you want to do. And it's precious time because that this is probably not going to happen again for a while.
Are they occupying the same Earth? Is there any sort of cosmic treadmill or
yeah, it's funny.
Earth?
I've read a lot of the story, and you saw it in Batman Deadpool. I think that kind of set the tone. And the funny part is and this is interesting, I had not read any of Batman Deadpool because it wasn't out. It wasn't produced when they asked me to do this. So I wrote my story without seeing anything. And
Okay.
then when my story was done and Pepe was already drawing it, Nick sent me copies of, and my friend Noah sent me copies of the Batman Deadpool and Deadpool Batman. And I was done. So I was just like, well, now I'm going to see if I did it right or did it wrong. And what was fascinating is, as you saw in there, some people, like Grant Morrison had a beautiful story that was all kind of about like that they were on these different places and how they were getting together and why they were getting together. And that was the point, part of the point of a story that I love. And others just were like, here we are. I took the term of we're here. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. I remember when I was doing Identity Crisis, someone said to me, the last time we saw Dr. Light, he was trapped in the Oa power battery up on Oa. Do you want to explain how he got out to be in this story? And I was like, I don't care how he got out. I mean, it's great if someone wants to tell that story, but that is absolutely unnecessary to really use him in this story. And I think there's obviously stories to be told about how we got here and are they on the, but I don't care. I just threw them together and here we are.
Brad, these kind of stories are going to stand the test of time. It always reminds me of Electric Blue Superman or Spider-Man has six arms, whatever. And it's like, no, man, we want a story that's going to stand the test of time. That, 10 years from now, however long, much like the original that Conway, Andrew, and Esposito did. So I think that's important.
What was crazy is that I know obviously Conway did those first ones is, Conway was such a big influence on me from Justice League work, right? His early Justice League work was just killer to me. And I remember meeting him and Marv Wolfman years and years ago. I don't even know if he'll remember. Marv and I became friends, and I know him just because I saw him more. And Conway, I didn't obviously see as much. But those guys had such an impact on me. Those stories had such an impact on me. They informed my novels, they informed my kids' books, they inform obviously what I'm doing here. And like you said, I mean, I feel like I remember nearly every comic I read, and I've got, ridiculous amounts of comic book long boxes. But those Superman, Spider-Man stories, that Batman Hulk story, when Batman boxes his ears and the Hulk takes a breath and then he gasses him and he knows the Hulk is strong, but he's got to breathe. Like, I know as I say it out loud, that's got to be some backwards influence on when I had Deathstroke fight the Justice League, right? It was just like there are things that you can exploit and we're going to exploit them, and they're all the human sides of what you do. And, again, to be lucky enough to do one of these stories that there's only been a couple of. Now, I mean, in my head, obviously the Stan Lee stuff that they did when in the Amalgam universe was a very different thing. But those two oversized collections and to suddenly be doing the third big one, trust me, every page I felt like I owe it to give it everything I've got. I dropped everything for weeks to make sure it was as perfect as I could make it.
Tell me about Pepe and what he's doing for the book.
So Pepe Larraz let me tell you something. He first came on my radar back on when he was doing X-Men. And I remember going, I always know an artist is great when I don't recognize them, but I want to now know their name, right? Because what we tend to do at a certain age is just be like, I like it was when when George Perez was there and John Byrne was there, and I want to see Brian Boland. And you have your artists, right? There's a saying that says everyone has their version of New York. Like you get old and you're like, when I was here, this was a dry cleaner, and this is now, I can't believe this is a Panera. That we have our old version of New York. And I think we, in many ways, have our own old versions of our comics, right? That they had to be done our way. And so I can, give me any comic. And for the most part, I can tell you who the artist is from a certain era. And then I remember reading his X-Men and I didn't recognize the art. And I flipped back to the front of the book, or I don't know if it was back. I think it was in the front back then. And I was like, this guy's so good. Who is he? And that's how I learned Pepe's name. I literally was like, and then I had followed him just because I thought it was amazing. And of course, my first question when it with Nick was, who can we get on art? Because I have my list. I want to, Nick, I'm sure, has his list. And there was no list. There was one name, and it was Pepe. And I was so excited that we were getting him. And the funny part is I knew he was good. In fact, I knew he was great. I can't wait till the story comes out because I want to release the early design work he did for what we're doing in the book. And we had to do a lot of early design for the certain thing that we're doing, and the certain scene we're doing. And I was like, just the design came in, and I was like, oh wow, I want this. Like this is, and he just made the entire universe come to life. And what I really love is there's a couple panels, like 3 pages, where he added a beat here or a beat there. He's like, I think we need a beat here. And he just added a whole panel of just an expression, of just a reaction. And I was like, oh, that's, and when you work with someone in comics as an artist, you're kind of feeling your way. It's like a dance partner, right? Like you're trying to figure out, should I lead? Should he lead? Like you're trying to figure out each other's rhythms. You're trying to be respectful of each other's rhythms. He's trying to be respectful of writing. I'm trying to be respectful of the art. And it's the first issue and the only issue we got together. And so in the beginning, he's like, I hope this is okay. I added this thing here. And I was like, oh, that's freaking awesome. And then he did it again, and he just made the book better. And I can't wait for you to see not just the book, because you'll be blown away, but I can't wait for you to see the design work he did. And one of the first things he actually sent me was his design for Superman and Clark Kent, because obviously he's the monthly artist on Spider-Man, and his Spider-Man is, chef's kiss. It's beautiful. He knows how to, not to me, since like McFarlane and Larson like lifted the legs over the shoulders and made that weird pose of theirs that became iconic. There's someone who just knows how to twist his torso just enough that it's like, that's a Pepe pose. But he'd never done Clark Kent, and he'd never done Superman. And he sent me these full color, not even pencil, full color. He painted drawings of, and it's Superman just full like this. And then he draws a Clark Kent and he's like this, but he's big like John Burns, which I wrote in the script. Like I like my Clark Kent where he's big, but he got the slouch perfect and believable in that Christopher Reeve way. That moment when Christopher Reeve puts on the glass, takes him off, and there's the Juilliard actor, and he just becomes him. And I'm like, oh my goodness, people are going to crap their pants. So Pepe is so lucky and the nicest guy in the world.
That's great. I'll throw Frank Quitely in there too, because he couldn't have understood that Clark could be big and yet still meek. So
when I went to the Superman premiere, my only request, I'm going to say this just to drive Nick crazy. My only request is, I said I was standing in line at the premiere waiting to get our credentials to get into the movie. And the person who was in front of me is Frank Quitely. So immediately I'm like, and I'd never met Frank before, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and we're talking. And I said to him, when it comes to acting, no one can do what he has a kinetic movement that's like nobody else, and he does acting like no one does. Facial expressions, that line work is so good. And I begged Nick, could Frank Quitely do the cover? I wanted Frank to do, the back of the cover of the second big compendium where it's Superman and Spider-Man back to back like this,
of course,
standing there like buddies. I wanted Frank Quitely to do that. And I said, can we get him, Nick? Please, Dad, when I get him, can we get him? And I guess I didn't know this, but at the time, Frank had agreed to do the DC one. So he did a Deadpool Batman, but I didn't know any of this because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
And I believe I've heard rumors that he might be doing something similar on the DC side book. So I hope that that's the case. And if not, I'm going to call him myself and beg him to do it.
That's hilarious. Did you have a chance to talk to Wade about it after the fact, after you guys wrote your story?
I haven't talked to Mark yet. Wade and I are good friends, obviously,
sure.
Full respect. When I heard it was him, I'm like, of course, as it should be. Like, it's wonderful that he's doing it. I want to do like a panel or a conversation somewhere where Mark and I just get to do it, because obviously both of us are not just people who love Superman, but we're, obsessed, I guess is the word. We're historians of that character. We are, guardians of it. I think we see ourselves at it, and we just have that like long history with that character. So I did not get to speak to him. I never saw his story. And I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. I can't wait to read it.
Excellent. And of course, now you mentioned the movie. What do you think of what Gunn's doing with the DC universe?
Oh, are you kidding me? How can we not be happier? The second movie that we're getting under James Gunn is the best Supergirl story ever written. That tells me we're in good hands, right? Tom King is a dear friend of mine, and what he, and I always mispronounce her name, Bilquis. I always what they
Oh
did
yeah, yeah.
on
Bill Cus
Supergirl
yeah,
is
heavily.
it.
Yeah.
It is, truthfully, I didn't have much love for Supergirl as a character growing up. It was more nostalgia. I liked those ones that were in the eras, that I grew up in, but
She-
I never understood the character. It was just like a little cousin. But when Tom came in and found that gear, that was like, I was older and I saw Krypton die. I was blown away. And you saw the trailer, my cousin believes everyone's good. And I'm going to tell you how it really is. Like, they've told us in the trailer exactly what the movie is about and what that character is about, which is exactly what the book was about, which was this incredible woman with a different point of view trying to find the light in the darkest of times. And the fact that that's the second movie, not some, cheesy ripoff or some whatever, what do we think is going to sell, or we got to get this out, tells me, of course, we're in great hands with James Gunn. I couldn't be happier. And he's obviously such a fan. What people don't know is at the premiere, this is what people need to know about James Gunn is well, I've been to a lot of premieres with DC over the years, went to the, you know, Batman, Superman ones. I've been to like a ton of them over the years. And usually the way these things used to go is you go there's an after party, and you go in the after party, and all of us comic people, we all gravitate to like the corner, right? Like it's just what we do. It's just because it's not our party, right? It's a super, Hollywood party. And inevitably there's the stars of the movie who are big stars, and they have their own kind of like roped off VIP section. And we certainly don't go over there because that's cool personville. And then there's like the agents and the Hollywood people are all over there, and we're kind of all of us nerds are in the corner. And it's usually like me and Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb or whoever else, or Wade or whoever else is there. We're all kind of like hanging out. And at the Superman premiere this time, not only was everyone kind of like in the beginning, they actually were bringing the stars around to meet comic book characters. At that point, I just approached everyone because I was like, I don't care. I don't have to sit in the corner. And but they were bringing the stars around to meet the people who worked on the comics, which tells you everything you need to know. But what I loved even more is James Gunn personally was going up. He had invited, and I'm going to mess it up, but it was like, whether it was the creator of Crypto or the creator of Supergirl, like obviously Otto Binder, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, like
Yeah,
whoever that family is, he's long gone.
Yes.
But he had their relatives there.
Wow.
Some of those relatives had brought original art from their dad or grandparent or whoever it was. And James Gunn was going up to spend time. And the fact that he invited those people and was spending time with them just tells you what a spectacular fan he is and how much respect he's showing to that history we love.
That's excellent, man. That's so great to hear. And we got a couple more minutes, but I'm gonna bug you maybe in a couple months to when we have more time and I have more voice. And by the way, shout out to the calculator, Noah Cutler, our friend.
Always Noah Cutler. Noah Cutler is who I named the calculator after, and who's a big fan of your show. And what I love most of all is that when you Google Noah Cutler now, like if you Google him and you meet him in real life, he comes up as a supervillain. And that to me is basically the best thing you could possibly do for your friends is totally wreck their Google search.
That's excellent.
I'm very proud of that.
With the couple minutes we have left, what can you tell me about Ghost Machine and what you got coming up this spring?
Yeah, let's talk about Ghost Machine. So in fact, what I was doing before in the couple minutes I have between your call and another interview was proofing first Ghost #1. So Ghost Machine, as you know, Jeff Johns, myself, and all these amazing art, Francis Manipul, and all these wonderful artists, Brian Hitch, formed this company, Ghost Machine. They have, whether it's Redcoat, whether it's Geiger, whether it's Rook, incredible stories, Hornsby and Halo, and Hyde Street. And I'm finally getting to do my book for them. It's a book that Jeff Johns and I wrote together. It's called First Ghost. And it's hopefully going to be out. The goal is to get the first issue out, I think, by Comic-Con, by San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay.
Is our goal. The only thing that's been taking so long is Gene Haas, the artist on it, and he's just doing breathtaking work. But the first issue is it's a 48-page issue. It's like it's like 2 books. So everyone's like, well, how did it take so long on issue #1? It's like, because it's really issue 1 and 2. We wanted to really just set this whole universe in play. And it's basically built on the idea that when Abraham Lincoln's son died, people started saying the White House was haunted. And it's all about a about the ghosts that haunt the White House, is what I'll say. And the first ghost is coming, and I wait until you see it. It's so beautiful. And Gene Ha, who he and I worked together on Justice League together on
Absolutely.
issue 11, and he's just the greatest.
You don't have to tell me, buddy. He's a local friend, and of course,
Oh
your
yeah,
Eisner
right. He's
winning.
Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, and your Eisner winning issue with Gene JLA 11. Absolutely. No, I'm excited. I'm a big Redcoat fan, and I talk to Hitchy all the time about how much I'm enjoying that story.
He's the best, man. I mean, he's what he's doing, and we have when I was growing up, the Marvel bullpen to me was always such a cool idea, right? Like it was like, because again, there was no one, there was, I think, one kid who liked comics a little bit in my school growing up, but basically I was the guy who liked comics. There was one other guy who kind of liked them. And if you could find another comic book person, that was a miracle. And the Marvel bullpen, therefore, to me, was like always the dream come true because they all work together. That was like the Justice League of creators. Like they're all together. And I remember when I first was in graduated college, Ben Rabb, my buddy from Michigan,
Sure.
had an internship at Marvel, and he was like, "You want to come down and see the offices?" And I was like 22, 3 years old, and I was like, "Yeah, man, I've been waiting my whole life to go there." And he took us down. We went to those original offices, and he showed me the bullpen, and I was like, "This is where everyone works." He's like, no one works here. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And that was the moment where I found out that the bullpen was just like this fake creation that Stan Lee sold us in his great Stan Lee selling ways. Like writers weren't, maybe there were obviously people who were doing art stuff and maybe letterers and things like that were there, but and editors, but for the most part, the writer was here and the artist was here and the shipping stuff or walking it in from Brooklyn or God knows what they were doing with it. And it broke my heart. I was like, I wanted the bullpen to exist. And I tell you all that because Ghost Machine actually has a bullpen. The Ghost Machine phone thread is the most fun thing. And one of the greatest perks of working at Ghost Machine is you're on an email thread with Hitchy, with Jason Fabok, with Francis, and with Pete and with Jeff and with
Yeah.
myself and Danny and all the, Mike Cotton and it is a Brian Cunningham, like, and in my head, I know it's just a text chain, but it's the bullpen because it's everyone it's not, we're talking comics, we're talking, everything from like what's going on in culture to, who's good, who's bad, who do we hate, who do we love. I mean, it just feels like the bullpen's alive. And Ghost Machine has truly some of the nicest people in the entire business. You know that to be true. And I love working with them.
That's been my pleasure for these 20 years, getting to know these guys and women. And I'm so glad that all of you guys are together doing this stuff. And I think that's going to be great. I'm watching the clock because I want you to have a chance to breathe and before your next interview. But so April is when Superman Spider-Man comes out.
April 15th, they tell me, tax day.
There
So
we
you
go.
will get your tax refund and I guess by whatever, that issue comes out. I can't I honestly cannot wait. I can't wait. I'm just truly waiting for the lettering and the art is looking so beautiful and I can't wait to see it.
Well, when it's out, can we do a new talk and
Of course,
because
this is like just all, I can't wait for you to read it. That's it. That's all I could possibly say. Like if you said to me like, okay, you can take all your comic book stories and, whatever, like that you were excited to do, I don't, this was right up there with anything.
well, regardless, there's so much else to talk to you about. I want to know how things are going with novels, with the IM books, with PBS cartoons like Xavier
Yeah, you'll
Hill.
see it. And I should say, I would be remiss not to say, so Chris Eliopoulos, of course, and I do uh, the I Am book series. And on February 9th, so right after you see this, we come out with the newest book in this series. We just did We Are the Beatles, which I think we sell to more adults than I think the kids at this point. Because I drove Chris crazy because Chris, like we have I was like, I want every version. But, usually we do Abraham Lincoln and he's got the top hat and he's got the beard and he looks the same in every page. But the Beatles evolve. So I was like, I want every version of the Beatles in here, Chris. And Chris is, by the way, a bigger Beatles fan than even I am. And I was like, we want Yellow Submarine and we want this version, we want that version, the cartoon version. I'm like, when we do, Revolver and Rubber Soul, I want it to vibrate a little bit because I want the parents that are reading it to know drugs. Like I wanted every part of the Beatles to be in there. So we did We Are the Beatles. Then we did a book on mental health. We did I Am Simone Biles, which just came out. But in a week and a half's time, on February 9th, we're doing our first book on empathy, which is I Am Princess Diana. And if you want a book that's really incredible, Princess Diana just blew me away. A hero that we actually need right now, someone who's kind and empathetic to and in a position of power. So that to me is a real hero move.
That's excellent, Brad. Well, that gives me an excuse to bug Chris and get him back to talk about the IM
Oh
book.
yeah. Well, just if you bug Chris, that's always just a good thing. No, I mean that is pretty much the mission.
There you go. My man, great to talk to you. Thank
Always,
you.
brother.
Seriously, thank you for 20 years of friendship and always coming back. We always
No,
have
you know
great
what I
times,
love?
brother.
Can I just tell you, like, what I love the most is how many people on my book tour, people come on the tour for the Viper and they want their comic book signed, which of course we always sign. They're always so sweet because they're like, I don't even read novels, but I'm buying this Viper because I want to support you. I'm like, people are nice, but I can't tell you how many people in line that bring comics have said to me, I listened to you on John's show. I listened to you on Word Balloon. Like, and you should just know that you have so many great people out there cheering for you, rooting you on. And I love the fact you've built this long-term audience. It's great. And I will say, it's like, I haven't done comics in a while. So it used to be when I was doing Just League and that, the first question at every book signing was always like a comic book person wanting to know what's going to happen in whatever issue of Justice League was going on or Identity Crisis. And it's kind of, pared down a little bit. But on the Wednesday that they announced Superman, Spider-Man, I was in St. Louis, and the very first, I said, time for questions, and the first hand went up, and the person, I said, yes, and they said, and they just looked at me and went, Spider-Man, Superman? And that was it. That was I was like, I'm not even sure that's a sentence, but I love the fact that it evokes in grown adults, we all become 7 years old again.
We're all excited, Brad. You got a great lineup following you as well. And
Yeah, no, I love this lineup. So many good people in that issue.
I'm looking forward to it. As always, brother, take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon.
Can't wait.